Hey you guys, it's Joel, the 3D printing nerd, and look at this. This is the TAZ6 box, but wait a minute, the embargo is over, and there it is, the TAZ6. This is gonna be my review. Are you ready? Go. Welcome back. So here it is. This is the TAZ6 from Lulzbot, and the embargo is now finally over, and you can take a look at it on video. Look, it's on video. The TAZ6, it's a good printer. I had some good times with it. I did print some things with it. I did find out some things, and this is going to be really interesting because this is a pre-production model, and I did have some time to talk to tech support, and I did have some issues, and I'll cover those. And just like with any printer review I do, I'm gonna tell you about this printer, and I'm gonna show you some of the things I printed. I'm gonna tell you what I liked. I'm gonna tell you what I didn't like, and then I'm going to have some final thoughts. And what's interesting about this printer is my final thoughts aren't so final, and you'll get to find out why at the end of this video. But for now, let me tell you about this printer. Hey, let me show you how to put this thing together. It ships like this. It's got this unit here, it's got the bed, and then it's got the extruder. We'll put the extruder on first. The extruder sits in this little seat right here, and then there's a single screw that goes up top to hold it in place and to keep it from falling over and hurting itself. It is a 2.5 millimeter screw, and they give you the hex wrench to use to tighten it up. All right, and then finally you connect up the electronics. The bed itself is held on by 4 bolts. First, let's put the bed on, and the bed will line up with these places to put the screws in. Just like that. There's 4 of them, and they look like that. 2 go in the back, 2 go in the front. There we go. All right, we got these 2 in. Now what we need to do is connect up the motor, and the motor's right back here. That's kind of easy to do. It's just a motor. Then there's this cable right here. This cable is going to connect up to these different connectors. We'll do the small one first. Let's see, I want to make sure. There we go. Then there's this one. And then finally, this big one, and I believe that's the power for the bed. And then you connect it under here, and that's good to go. The only thing left to do are the 2 bolts or screws right up front, and those go in like so. Those go in like so. The only thing left to do is slide the bed away, get your power plug, plug it in, and turn it on. And there we go. The Lulzbot TAZ6 is very familiar to me because I've been running with a Lulzbot MINI. If you take the Lulzbot MINI and you hit it with some sort of magical scientific ray that expands things, you'll essentially have yourself a TAZ6. The main features of the TAZ6 are borrowed from the MINI itself. Those features are the auto-leveling bed using the 4 corners and the wiper bar on the side of the printer's bed, whereas on the MINI, it's in the back. Also on the TAZ6 is this new hot swappable extruder and hot end assembly. There's a single bolt that you take out, and then you disconnect the electrical parts, and once you put that back together with a new hot end, you can get yourself a flexi extruder or a dual extruder or a flexi dually, and the printer just knows how to deal with it. Unlike the TAZ5, the power supply here is integrated. It's right here on the side, and then rather than having the LCD display right here, it's right here. Here's the power button, and here's this little selector wheel that lets you do cool things. One of the changes to the TAZ6 when compared to the TAZ5 is the build area, and that's because of a change to the build plate. The build plate is borosilicate glass with a PEI layer on top, just like before, but the size is a little bit different. The TAZ6 has a 280 by 280 by 250 build area, whereas the TAZ5 had a 290 by 275 by 250 build area. The TAZ6 loses 10 millimeters on the x-axis, but it gains 5 on the y. The extruder that comes with the TAZ6 is this guy. They call it a V2.1, at least that's what I saw in the documents. And it's got a hexagon hot end with a 0.5 millimeter nozzle. It takes 2.85 filament, just like before. The X and Y axes are on 2 linear rails and are belt driven, whereas the Z axis is on these awesome giant lead screws that make it go up and down, and they're beefy. For this review, Lulzbot sent me 2 spools of filament. They sent me this. This is the Alloy 910 from Talman, which is a nylon filament. The first time I've ever printed with a nylon filament. I really did like this. Lulzbot also sends some Chromastrand Innova 1800. It's very similar to ColorFab XT, and it prints in a similar fashion. It's very yellow as well. It's very yellow. I also had a roll of MakerGeek's purple PLA, and on the machine right now is Matterhackers Pro blue PLA. I don't have a lot of 2.85 millimeter filament. In fact, other than the eSun 2.85 millimeter that's on my Lulzbot Mini, this is all the 2.85 millimeter filament I have. I did want to print mainly with the filaments provided by Lulzbot because I felt if they gave me those filaments, that's what they wanted to concentrate with on the review. However, the Chromastrand and the Talman are relatively difficult filaments to print with compared with PLA, so I felt throwing PLA into the mix was a completely fair option. Also included with the Lulzbot was a really small strand of N-Gen. Of course, that's used to print out the Rocktopus, but there was enough left over to print a Benchy and a test piece and a Marvin as well. One of the first things I did print on this printer is this piece, and this was a small design I created in OpenSCAD, and I wanted to find out how far along the Y and how far along the X I could print. It's listed as 280 by 280, but within the Lulzbot Cura edition, I could only print 275 by 275, which I thought was interesting. And I'm not sure if that's typical, but I thought it might have to do with how the washers in each of the corners for the auto leveling stick into the build space just a little bit. I'll have to investigate further, but if you have a TAZ unit, please let me know if you see similar things. Next up, I did want to use that Chromastrand, so I printed this. This is the scared pyramid guy. I can't remember exactly. But look, his legs all wobbly and the bottom didn't turn out good. Something was wrong, and it turns out the bed itself was not working correctly. The belts were loose, and by loose, I mean loose. So I tightened up the belts, I printed him again, and he turned out much better, well, compared to this. More on that in a second. Of the test prints that I used N-Gen on, I made a Benchy, of course, and the Benchy looks like a Benchy, and it did okay. There's some slight Z aberrations in the layers, which was interesting. Very slight, but I think overall it's a good Benchy. I did have to print the Rocktopus, and he turned out okay. He was a little stringy for some reason. I haven't done a lot of N-Gen printing, but overall I would say the Octopus turned out decent. There's still this slight weirdness in the Z-axis, even on the Octopus model here. Marvin turned out okay. Marvin's a small model, but I think he turned out okay. I did, with the last bit of N-Gen, print this test piece, and unfortunately the arch did not survive because it had a very small contact space on the build plate. However, the rest of it did turn out quite nice. The pillars look good, and the holes within the test model do look okay. The wall thickness is appropriate in this square. This was just one of the ones on the SD card. A bunch of stuff comes on the SD card, so I thought, well, hey, I'm gonna pick a random one and print it with the rest of the N-Gen, and this is what came out. With the MakerGeek's purple PLA, I did print out a model from my mini factory of RoboCop's gun. This is the new RoboCop, not the 80s RoboCop. And the gun piece is printed out fairly well. I did see some Z artifacts in the top piece, and I keep referencing that, and I'll talk about that in just a second. But the rest of the pieces did turn out okay. Once I glue this together, I think it will be a really good prop, and the TAZ was great in printing this, and it all fit on the build plate. And that's one of the things that's great about having this larger build volume. You can print more pieces at once. You do run the risk of a failure, meaning everything fails, but live dangerously, get a bigger build plate, and just print everything at once. Finally, what I wanted to show off was piece number 5 of the 3D Kit Bash 3D printer test kit. 3D Kit Bash provided me these models so that I could test the printer and start using them to test the other printers that I have to put through. And that's great because I wanted some good pieces to test the functionality of a printer. Piece number 5 was, I'm choosing specific for this printer because it's what I used when I was talking with Lulzbot tech support. When I was printing piece number 5, there was horrible Z layering issues. And I say horrible in that this printer is known for top quality, and I didn't expect to see these sort of problems with this printer. I printed this piece with ChromaStrand Innova 1800. I reprinted again, reorienting the model just to see if how Cura laid down the infill made a difference after some suggestions from Lulzbot tech support, and it made it slightly better, but there was still layer lines off in the same spot in the new model. And just thinking maybe it was a material issue, I did print this one in Matterhackers Pro PLA, and it's the best one yet, but it still exhibits some of the Z layering problems that I was seeing in these other models. And I was like, what's going on? This is a TAZ6, this is brand new. This shouldn't be doing this. After going back and forth with Lulzbot tech support, it turns out that some of the issues I'm seeing on this printer have to do with it being pre-production, and they've put out some service bulletins on this printer and changed some of the ways they build them in the factory specific to the problems that I was having. Yeah, that was a mouthful. Let me explain. I was having some issues with this printer, and I went back and forth with Lulzbot tech support. Lulzbot is known for its tech support and its customer service, and after dealing with them, it's easily apparent why. They dealt with me in a wonderful manner. They never questioned my ability. They had me troubleshoot, and they had me try to look into things. And what it found out was, in some models, the braces for the metallic frame aren't tightened to a right tolerance, and the frame can go out of square. And they found this out because I was getting binding issues in this Z-axis coupler that attaches to the lead screw. In fact, when it was homing, it would go and it would grind, and that wasn't good. They've put out a service bulletin, and they're doing some fixes on this, and they're tightening things down a little bit better. One of the other things that I did notice when I got the printer was the Y-axis belt was loose, and I did have to tighten that. Luckily, it was easy, but it was just another thing on top of the other things that I was having issues with. All right, I've talked quite a bit. Let's get to what I like about this printer. First and foremost, the integrated power supply and moving the LCD over to here, brilliant. It's in a nice metal case on the side, and it's so perfect. Again, it lends itself to being a mini bigger. I love the auto leveling, and I love the wiper bar that was brought over from the Mini. It's a game-changing style of leveling the bed and cleaning the nozzle, and I hope they include it on all printers going forward. Lastly, what I want to say is the build size. I really like the build area of this printer. I like a large format printer, and I like that this one gives you a lot of space to put either a lot of models or one big model on the build plate. Now let's talk about things that I don't like about this printer. And I'm not going to include things that are problems with a pre-production unit, such as being out of square, the loose belt on the Y-axis. That can be fixed in process. I'm not worried about that. These are things that are on this printer that I think you should consider if you're going to purchase. The first thing I want to talk about is this extruder. It's a quick change. It's held on by one bolt, and look at that. It's loose. I'm moving this whole extruder assembly without moving the X-axis at all along its linear rails. What happens on this is the extruder doesn't sit in its holder very well, and so it rocks back and forth. I did talk to Lulzbot tech support, and they said that even though it shifts a little bit, it shouldn't impact print quality. I haven't had the best quality prints on this machine, and they say service bulletins and fixes will fix that, but I'm unsure if this rocking back and forth and not being seated properly is affecting print quality. I can't say either way, but I don't like that it shifts. I like an extruder and a nozzle and a hot end that sits still on the carriage, and the carriage moves it around. So as this moves, this does have the ability to shift a little bit. And even though it's a little bit, we're still talking about a 3D printer that deals in microns. So a little shift can make a big difference. The other thing that I don't like about the TAZ6 is the auto leveling and nozzle cleaning system. And you're thinking, wait, you just said this is a wonderful thing brought over from the Mini. It is, but they've slowed it down. On the Mini, the leveling and the nozzle scrubbing happen, well, quite quickly. I don't know if it's because the Mini has a smaller bed or different electronics, but when you enact the scrubbing and the self-leveling here on this printer, the nozzle scrub I found isn't fast enough to remove filament that has been on the nozzle on the side. So the Mini, when it's scrubbing so fast, that filament that's stuck on the nozzle does get embedded into the scrubber bar right here. But on the TAZ6, it's a very slow and methodical movement, and it's not fast enough to sometimes break stuck filament on the nozzle away from it. And I have seen filament stuck to the nozzle after the scrubbing has happened get into a print or affect the auto leveling system, because the auto leveling system uses electrical contact between the nozzle and the 4 washers around the corner. And if a piece of filament gets in the way, then that nozzle can't make electrical contact, and it will just keep pushing down even though it's already down, and you'll start hearing a grinding noise. That's not good. As far as these things that I don't like, such as this being shifty and the slow movement of the auto leveling and the nozzle cleaning, those are both easily addressed because this extruder assembly has 3D printed parts, and if they wanted to fix that, they could put out a bulletin and modify the parts and let users print new parts. As for the nozzle cleaning and the auto leveling, that's dealt with in G-code. So all they would have to do is update the G-code for the printer, and there you would have it. I don't know if any of that is possible or true or will happen, but those are the 2 issues that I have with this printer. All right, I need to give you some final thoughts on this printer, and my final thoughts also have to be, well, I have to say them based on a pre-production unit. And so in the case of this printer in a pre-production unit, I cannot recommend you having this. I think there are issues with it that need to be addressed before it can go out. Thankfully, they're addressing these, and I've arranged with Lulzbot to send this one back to their engineering department to investigate and to get a new production model here. So this isn't technically a final thought. This is almost a, well, until next time. I'm hoping what happens is I get a new Lulzbot TAZ6 in and I test it, and the Z-axis works fine and the Y-axis belts are tight and everything works as it should. And then I can put forth a 2 thumbs up, go out and get this. It's a wonderful printer. But right now I don't know that for sure. I can't honestly say go buy this printer right now without getting my hands on the final unit that you yourself would receive. So if you're going to base your decision to buy this printer completely on my opinions and my experience with it, I'm going to tell you to hold off until I get a new TAZ6 in to test myself and then further evaluate. Honestly, just between you and me, I'm not that worried about it. Lulzbot has been wonderful with their tech support. They've been timely, and I've heard back from them almost minutes later. I have a good relationship with them, and in fact, I'm going to see them at Maker Faire, so that'll be fantastic. And I have no doubt, I have very little to no doubt that a new production TAZ6 coming to me will have these problems addressed, and I'll be able to put forth a, hey, buy this printer. This is a wonderful printer, I recommend it. But right now, I just can't say that because it's a pre-production unit with problems. Well, hey, there we go. This is my not final now review of this TAZ6 pre-production unit. Once I get the new unit in, I'll put it through its paces and I'll update you in a video letting you know what's been fixed, if there are any more problems, and my final recommendation on the printer. Well, thanks for watching this review with me. Again, give it a thumbs up if you like Lulzbot, or if you like large format printers, or if you find rainbows are cool and bacon is tasty. Leave a comment down below if you have any further questions about anything I mentioned in this video, if you have further questions on the TAZ6. If you'd like to financially support the channel, you can click over there and donate $1 or more a month via Patreon to me. I'm never going to require that, and I'm just going to ask that every once in a while you give me a social high five. And speaking of high fives, as always, high five.
He's Joel telling and he's printing 3D like some Pokemon, a gun from Destiny. And when you call him a nerd, he'll stand up proudly, cause he's packing some heat from his YouTube family. He can review printers till he falls to the floor, then he'll give them away like Oprah in 04. There's the Wombat, Lulzbot, G-Max XT, then a break for Red Bull and Locos Taco Crispy. Printed koozie in his hand for his drink. He sets up his GoPro and prints out a bender bang. So send him $1 to put in his head, or a self-addressed envelope for a sticker instead. There's a Nerd Vlogs, unboxings, and Q's and A's, and he'll open your mail every single Friday. And of course you can't forget that Pancake Bot and Filaments, Bonacles, and Joel's little Taz. And they printed this printer at Holodeck Studio like Lando Calrissian and freeze-dried Han Solo. So show your support on Patreon or subscribe, and as always, high five.